Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, with an estimated population of over 600,000. A city rich in history and culture. But how many of us are actually aware of our city's history? In this documentary, we take a look at the dark, murderous, and the unexplained. This is the lore of Glasgow. For our first stop, we take a trip to the Gorbals on Glasgow's south side, an area known for its rich industrial past. Although in September 1954, things took a turn for the mysterious when a group of school children stormed a cemetery looking for a vampire.
The man with the iron teeth story, it's amazing even till today in 2017. It's asked about quite a lot, and recently there was a play done in the Citizens Theatre about it. I kind of came across it through various research that I've been doing in different characters on the cemetery, and I had known about it through meeting lots of different people, especially local people, older local people who were actually there when it happened. I did some research on it, and it was amazing to find out that in 1954 in September 150 children converged on the Southern Acropolis with crucifixes, crosses, homemade axes and penknives looking for a man with iron teeth. There's lots of different adaptations to the name of it. It's the man with iron teeth, the man with metal teeth, or just the Gorbals vampire. But I think it's a great story to have a cemetery that's got an urban myth and legend attached to it. I feel the cemetery, it's important to promote the history and heritage of it, because basically, most importantly for the younger generation, local schools, primary schools, to let them get an ownership and identity with the cemetery. And again, it's part of their heritage and it's their history.
The tale of the Gorbals vampire is now more prominent than ever, with a comic book series and a stage show performed at the Citizens Theatre.
So the story of the Gorbals vampire, it actually got brought to me by Guy Hollins, who works at the Citizens Theatre. He had heard the story through one of the participants. They were actually one of the kids when it originally happened, and they were doing the classes and they were talking about it, and they'd identified that story as a potential project or something that'd be good to go in as a big community show. So the play is written for a cast. I think we performed it with a cast of 40, but it's deliberately written so that it can be performed with as big or as small a cast as possible, and it's basically told through the space of a week leading up to all the kids being in that graveyard alongside the Gorbals vampire. My God is Joss Whedon, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, I think, the best piece of telly ever written. So as soon as I heard there was something set in Glasgow that was also to do with vampires, I pretty much bit the hand off him to be involved in it.
The square mile of murder marks an area at the edge of Glasgow's city centre, where 4 historic murders took place between the late 19th century and early 20th.
I first became aware of the Square Mile of Murder thanks to the Glasgow author and journalist Jack House. He produced a book, I think in the 60s or 70s, called Square Mile of Murder. He was the one that coined the phrase, and it was subsequently turned into, I think, a 4-part BBC TV series which I watched, and that's when I first became aware of these 4 very famous Glasgow murder cases. The 4 murders were the killing of Jessie McLachlan in Sandiford Place, the Dr. Edward Pritchard case, the Madeleine Smith poisoning case, which is very, very famous indeed, and finally the Oscar Slater case in 1908, which was one of Scotland's most notorious miscarriages of justice.
Perhaps the most famous one is the case of Madeleine Smith, who was accused of poisoning with arsenic her illicit boyfriend. She was well-to-do, she lived in the West End of Glasgow. Her parents were very keen that she married in their social status, and she was having sexual relations with a gardener from the Channel Islands, I think. And the only way she could get out of it was apparently to poison the poor lad. And she did it in a very haphazard way. She bought the arsenic in her own name and somehow managed to get a not proven verdict.
Madeleine Smith, the debate rages whether or not she poisoned Pierre-Emile Langelier by putting arsenic in his hot chocolate. Nobody can be certain that she did. The evidence is, I would say that the verdict of not proven in that case was pretty on the mark. The evidence was pretty dodgy. The prosecution couldn't actually tie her down to having seen Langelier on the 3 occasions when they knew that he had taken arsenic. Although in his diary he does say that he was with her, but the diary was not admissible in court.
The Sandiford murder case focused on Jessie McPherson, who was struck 40 times with a meat cleaver. Her friend, Jessie McLachlan, was accused and trialled for the murder. A judge found her guilty of murder, sentencing her to death. Due to public outcry, an investigation saw her sentence decreased to the lesser sentence of life imprisonment, of which she served 15 years.
Jessie McLachlan, who was convicted of the murder of Jessie McPherson, she was certainly involved in some way, perhaps not in the actual murder, which is believed to have been done by an elderly man called James Fleming, who was the father of the man who owned the house. But Jessie McLachlan was certainly involved in some way. Whether or not it was after the fact, before the fact, she was certainly involved, and she did some time.
Dr. Edward Pritchard was arrested at Queen Street Station, just back from saying goodbye to his wife, insisting her coffin be opened and kissing her goodbye with tears streaming down his face. For this, he became known as the human crocodile, a fittingly ghoulish title inspired by the legend that crocs cry as they devour their prey.
He had come up to Scotland from England with his wife and family. He left there under something of a cloud because he had wandering hand trouble. Eventually he was brought to trial for the murder of his wife and his mother-in-law, poisoning by antimony. He was also, it was suggested, responsible for the earlier death of a maid who died in a house fire. It was said at the time that he had got her pregnant, but the post-mortem didn't back that up. So there was never any charges brought to that, but there were certainly some suspicions at the time. He was a bit of a lad, who liked to think of himself as a bit of a lad. He was having an affair with one of his maids, and he had taken out an insurance policy on his wife. Not a huge one, it has to be said, but it certainly existed, and he began to slowly poison her. She rallied when her mother-in-law came to stay from Edinburgh, but within 2 weeks her mother-in-law had developed the same symptoms and died, and obviously it meant that he had, in his eyes, she had to go so that he could carry on with slowly poisoning his wife, which he subsequently did. He showed all the Victorian hypocrisy of the age. He had the coffin open so that he could kiss her dead lips. He, threw a bit of a scene over the coffin. And when he returned to Glasgow after the funeral, he was arrested at the station by the police.
Oscar Slater was wrongly accused for the murder of Marion Gilchrist. After facing trial and even being given an alibi by defence witnesses, Slater was found guilty and sentenced to death in May 1909. Within 48 hours of facing the gallows, he received the reduced sentence of life imprisonment. After a number of pleas, investigations and petitions, Oscar was finally released on November the 8th, 1927.
Oscar Slater, without a doubt, did not murder Marion Gilchrist. The investigation was a sham. And even now when you read about it, you can feel the rage building up to you within you as you read exactly what happened to that man. Even in its day, there was unrest about the verdict and about the investigation. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, took an interest in the case. People signed petitions about it. A very experienced police officer, Lieutenant Trench, lost his job because he had misgivings about the case and he leaked information. He believed that there were some higher-ups backing him in this, but when push came to shove, he turned around and they weren't there. He lost his job because he leaked information about it, and really that's what started the whole thing, the whole ball rolling with regards to Oscar Slater. He could very easily have been hung, and an innocent man, and not the first or the last probably, would have gone to the gallows.
Jack House is largely responsible, I think, for putting them all together in that square mile of the west end of Glasgow. I mean, they are very different cases. I think in all of them, had they occurred today, they would probably all have got off with a clever QC. Certainly, with the exception of Madeleine Smith, who I think probably got the verdict because she was a well-to-do middle-class, relatively attractive woman that the jury went for and gave her a not proven verdict.
As I say, Oscar Slater was just an absolutely atrocious miscarriage of justice, and I think these are also some of the reasons why they continue to live on, because you have the mystery. People love a mystery, people love to probe, people love to hope that they're going to find that one wee bit of information that might blow the whole story wide open.
A city filled with murder, hauntings and unbelievable stories passed down through the generations. We have only touched on Glasgow's past, so who knows how many tales are out there waiting to be discovered.